It is Wednesday, January 27th, and we are waiting for a Zoom meeting to start on the Red Rover Mine Project in Acton, and we're going to see what that's about today, what they're planning on doing in that area. It's a community meeting with the owners of the mine to discuss an upcoming project.
We need to give people a few minutes to join the Zoom conference call.
Somebody's talking to me. We're muted, right? No.
Graham would be the guy that they'd have to worry about.
Dr. Ramirez.
Yeah.
Or that. Dr. Ramirez. Here. Thanks.
We still have some people joining here in a few more minutes. I appreciate that everybody in the time of COVID is willing to join us via Zoom. And I understand that not everybody particularly facile with it or preferred means of communication, but we really wanted to take this opportunity to explain our company and the projects we do and make sure that before we initiated any significant activities, that we presented the project to the community and obtained some of your feedback.
John, I'm giving James a call right now to prompt him to get on.
Interested in asking a question, wait until we are done with our presentation. But please log your name and your question in the chat function. And that way we will be able to respond to each and every one of them.
John, really quick, is this being recorded?
It is being recorded, yes. And in the chat function, in a dialog box down to the lower right, you will see the ability to make your questions viewable by everybody in the group. And that would be useful to make sure we don't lose track of anybody. So with that, I'll get started then. So as I mentioned, Rover Development Company is the project proponent for this project. And some of you may have observed that we've made a few site visits to get a feel for the property and the site conditions. But we are just getting before LA County and wanted to make sure that the community had the opportunity to be informed about the project and we can solicit the feedback. So BlackRock Development Company is really the process provider and contractor for the project. We will be responsible for all of the permitting and site activities and the prospecting activities. We have a joint venture with Red Rover Mine, Inc., who is the longtime claim holder for the Red Rover Mine, and in addition owns several parcels in and around the Red Rover Mine, 3 of which we will be prospecting on and is the subject of our call today. It's my pleasure to introduce to you James Wohl. He's on the call today as one of our partners. And James, at this point, I'll turn it over to you to make any comments and introduce yourself.
Well, hello, and it's my great pleasure to be sitting at the same table, practically, with all of you, and especially John, who is, like all of us, a great pioneer, because we're doing things that people really don't believe are possible, and we are going to do them, and in an opportunity zone and in Acton, California. And I'm very happy to be sitting here with my assistant, Maria Villagomez, and her sweetheart, Matt.
Or you can just call me Frank.
Anyway, I think I've probably said enough, but I certainly will be willing to answer some questions, having been involved with the Red Rover mine itself now. This is the 40th year, and we are in the process of getting our finances in order, and we are about, I hope, to make a great contribution to the people of the area around Acton, California, and to you all and your families. Thanks.
How?
Okay, thank you very much, James. In addition, I believe my partner at BlackRock is on the phone, John Donahue. He and I are the ones in concert with a third partner, Shane Rover, who are developing the technology that's going to be deployed to this site to obtain access to the gold and other metals that are present there. And I'll explain a little bit more about the technology later on. So we wanted to be clear that this project is about prospecting on 15 acres comprised of 3 5-acre parcels just to the north of Avenue V. So this is private property that's adjacent but just north of the Red Rover mine. And it turns out that historical mining operations deposited rock from the mine along the ridge line that's on these 3 parcels. It's been there for many years. It's really become part of the landscape, and I'm sure your people who live in the area are familiar with what we're talking about. But it's really right at the end of the west side of Avenue V, and that's where we're going to be mobilizing in limited fashion to look at what's available in the rock. This is an overhead photo, obviously, of Acton in the Red Rover mine. But just to put the site into context, it's inside the red circle that's shown here. Again, right in between the 2 parts of Avenue V where it doesn't go through. In terms of prospecting, this is a terrain map that our consultant Dudek prepared. Again, just really showing the area, the parcels involved in the area of operations that we're going to be limiting ourselves to. So we're really only looking at a small fraction of the property, and even further, just even prospecting even smaller amounts of the rock that are present in those piles. So here's a photo actually taken from the east side of this ridge line in the 2 hills where the surplus rock is located. Again, so this is looking from the east, standing on Red Rover Mine Road.
May I interrupt? This is Stan.
Sure, go ahead.
This is Stan Abrahamson, and I'm on here, but I don't see any of what you're saying. So either you share your screen with everyone so we can see the maps, but I'm right here on Red Rover, and I don't see anything that you're talking about. Would you be kind enough to share your screen?
Well, my system says I'm screen sharing. Does everyone else have this issue?
John Noir.
I see it.
No.
I have it on my computer.
It's up.
I can see it.
Yeah, so I apologize there. And can everyone see that I'm flipping back and forth between the exhibits?
I can see it.
Okay.
I still don't see anything. Okay. And I've
Try
used
logging
Zoom
off and
all
logging
morning.
back on.
I've used Zoom all morning for business, so.
So try logging back on.
All right, thank you very much.
But we'd be happy to take your email and send you a copy of it.
Please do, please do. Thank you.
Just make sure we have your contact info. So what we're proposing is availing ourselves of exemptions under state and local regulation to do limited excavations to look at the gold content and other metal content at the site. We'll also limit the area that we are impacting so that we avoid staying out of hillside management area zones in other places that are not as opportune to work in. So essentially we'll be confining our activities to the tops of these rock piles and locating the processing off to the side. What I think might be interesting to a lot of people, and of course is very important to the project, the technology that BRDC is going to use is a green process. And a lot of people have negative stereotypes of mining, but our process is modular, it's temporary, it's relatively small scale, and it does not use cyanide. So we use proprietary chemistry and processing techniques to extract the gold and other metals.
May I interrupt again? It's Stan Abrahamson. I just clicked on for the screen sharing, and my little notice came up there that the host had disabled the screen sharing. So have you disabled it, or, because I don't want to wait for I'll get a copy, but I want to know why mine is saying that you have disabled it, and I use Zoom every day.
Stanley?
Sir, that disablement is so that you can't screen share. Only the host can screen share to everybody else.
Okay.
I'm not so sure that setting is the issue. That if you were going to present something to us, then
I understand that. I'm just double checking because I feel left out here, to tell you the truth, and I'm an immediate neighbor of where you're gonna mine.
okay. Well, we certainly appreciate your interest and feedback, and we'll do everything we can to.
Hey Stan, really, I was having a similar problem really quick. If you go to the top of the screen, you'll see where it says you are viewing John Loveland's.
Our plans for the site, which will include road preparation, road improvement, health hazard assessment, safety plans, stormwater management plans. We'll also include a reclamation and restoration plan for the activities that we perform on the site. And so the ultimate goal is we'll certainly leave it in better shape than we found it.
Private roads.
I wanted to introduce to you our project team, some of whom are on the call today. DUDET is a environmental permitting consulting entitlements consulting firm. They're assisting us now in the planning phase. We have Peter Whittingham and Roger Fabo, both who are on the phone. They're our public affairs. Fred Lowther is our general counsel and with Blank Rome out of DC. He is not on the call today, but he has a wealth of experience in permitting large projects. And then Kiewit Corp is going to be our turnkey contractor operator and will perform most of the site duties and activities. And they're obviously, for those that aren't aware, one of the nation's largest and certainly the best heavy civil contractors in the country. In terms of project status, as I mentioned, we're in the planning phase right now. This is our first instance of community outreach, and we certainly plan to have a continual exchange with the community in terms of status and information and progress. One of the reasons we wanted to contact you is that to assist in the planning phase, we need to conduct an aerial survey of the site and get a precise map developed. So in the near future, you will see that activity taking place out at the site. We have initiated permitting with LA County and have a meeting application and some preliminary materials in front of them, and are waiting to have our first scoping and project meeting with the county. And we're also coordinating with the Acton Town Council and Jacqueline Air, who I believe is on the call today.
If I may I speak? I want to make it clear to everybody that the Acton Town Council, neither the Acton Town Council nor me, has actually done any coordination with these project developers. They have asked to have a meeting with the Acton Town Council, and the Acton Town Council clarified that we're unable to meet with developers. As a policy, we don't meet with developers unless those meetings occur in the public eye. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear that there hasn't really been any coordination. There has been some emails to the Acton Town Council and some responses from the Acton Town Council, and those responses have indicated that we are unable to have a discussion or meeting with the developers unless the community was involved. And I'm guessing that is probably what the catalyst for this meeting, which I appreciate, but I don't want the public to have the understanding that there has been, interactions between the Acton Town Council or me on this project outside of the public eye. Thank you.
No, thank you, Jacqueline. In fact, maybe that's the wrong word to use then. We're basically seeking to keep you informed of our activities and our status. And yes, we will be seeking that public forum to continue to present the project and information.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, so that was not the intent of that meeting. Okay, so with that, I'd like to pass on, if you are interested in communicating further after this meeting is concluded, here is an email address, a phone number, and our website where there's more information about our process and what we do in the mining space. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing here for the moment, unless we need to go back and present some of the graphics. And give me 1 second here to open up the chat panel here so I can see what the questions are.
John, so far there's no questions.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. And that was Eric from Dudek. He's our project manager and is assisting us on the call.
So if anyone has a question, could you please type your name? If your name's not showing up when you're using Zoom, type your name and your question in the chat box, and we'll moderate the chat and then have John answer the questions or pitch it to the appropriate person to answer on the call.
So you're going to have us type in our questions and not just ask them?
That's so dumb.
Well, we just wanted to come up with a way not to have too many people talking at the same time or talking over each other. So,
okay.
I guess, Jacqueline, if by all means, if you've got questions, why don't you go first?
Well, I understand there's some intent to seek exemptions from SMARA and potentially, I'm not sure, county requirements. And that would mean that you would be disturbing, I think it's less than 1,000 cubic yards and less than an acre. But when I looked at your map drawing, the tailings pile that you're looking at or mapped out, that's much more than 1 acre. So my first question is, where are you going to be limiting your activity to qualify for these exemptions, and how is that limitation going to be enforced?
Well, that will be part of the plan that we present to the county. And I can tell you, the surface, the top of the surplus rock piles actually only constitute about 1.5 acres of the area on top of the rock piles where it's level. We do plan to seek that exemption, which states that you can excavate 1,000 cubic yards in any one location as long as the locations don't exceed 1 acre. That is correct. And so we intend to comply with that and not impact or excavate more than 1 acre.
So you mean, so how many locations are on this site? Because when I looked at the map, that the L-shaped parcel combined was 15 acres, and the area that you highlighted is much bigger than 1/15 of that site. So are you, are you contemplating an acre per parcel, or, I mean, you have several parcels, right?
There's 3 parcels, and we are contemplating the total surface area of, I guess, what we're calling pits that we will excavate to process and determine the metal content and what's available at the site. There will be multiple pits, but they will not add up to be greater than 1 acre.
Okay, so your intent is not to excavate the area that's highlighted, but portions of the area that's highlighted on that one area.
That's right. That portions of the area, that's really intended to convey, that's the work area. That's where equipment will be located.
And how much of that area, 1,000 cubic yards sounds like a lot, but it's really not that much in terms of the site size that you're looking at. So how is that 1,000 cubic yards going to be confirmed or affirmed or verified, or whatever the right word is?
So the scale of so determining prospecting at the site involves 2 components. One is accessing the material, and then one is processing it, because the value in the metals present have to be assessed in conjunction with the process that you use to pursue them. We only expect to be processing, and as I mentioned, our equipment is modular and it's temporary. We're going to start out processing at a relatively low rate, several, perhaps maybe 10 tons of material a day. That sounds like a lot, but again, in the context of 1,000 cubic yards, it's not. And eventually expand production, perhaps up to something between 50 to 100 tons per day. And that's still really not that much material on a daily basis. That will involve, right now the logistics of opening up a pit to determine where the metals are and at what depth and in what geology. It might include something like a pit that's 30 feet by 30 feet by 20 feet deep, or something like that.
Just one pit, right? Because 1,000 yards is basically 30 by 30 by 30 feet.
Yeah, actually what we're going to propose is more than one pit under the language of SMARA and the county code.
Okay, so, but once you've gone past your 30 feet by 30 feet by 30 feet area, that's your 1,000 yards.
Well, that's right, but to give you an example of I think how to correctly interpret the statute, a 30 by 30 foot pit is only 900 square feet, which is approximately 1/45 of an acre. So we think the intent of that language is to say in any one location, including, and it includes the language including overburden, etc., that in any one location that you prospect in can add up to 1,000 cubic yards, but then you can go look at another 1,000 cubic yards on your property.
So you're going to look at multiple locations, at each location extract or whatever 1,000 cubic yards at each of those locations, and as long as the total area of each of those locations doesn't exceed 1 acre, then you believe your SMARA exemption and your county code exemption would apply.
Yeah.
That's problematic for me, but I know a lot of people have questions, so I'm gonna
keep going, Jackie.
Basically, it's working around the language to figure out how to remove as much material as possible from the site, working within the language of the law. We all know what's going to happen here. We're not kids, and we don't need to sit here and act like we don't know what's going on. Let's just be honest, tell the truth. My house happens to sit 75 feet from your property line. Okay, so I'm not going to play games with it. You say you're going to improve our situation. We like where we live. We like our dirt road. We don't want 50 trucks a day driving back and forth on it. We like where we live. Don't belittle us by saying that you're going to improve our situation or improve the property. We like it like this. That's why we're here. That's why you don't live here. My wind meter read 60 miles an hour the other day. Are you going to tell me that with that much excavation going on a 60-mile-an-hour day, it's not going to be all over the neighborhood?
Thank you.
And also, what's buried in there? That was buried back in the late early 1900s. Do you know what chemicals? Do you know what containers have been thrown in that pile? No, you don't. And that's going to be blowing all over Acton.
Mm-hmm.
When you uncover it, that's when it starts blowing, and you don't know what's there until it's uncovered.
I think we agree with every concern that you enunciated. I have one question though. Who was speaking?
Go ahead. That's okay.
No, I was just. Could you identify?
No, you can go ahead and continue on.
Oh.
That's okay. Well, my neighbors all know me. My neighbors all know me. Everybody knows me. I'm the one in the neighborhood that goes around and finds out what's going on and makes sure whatever you can legally to come in here and do what you do. Now, if you owned that property and you lived on that property and this stuff was going to be blowing in your house every day, and you were going to be putting up with the trucks on your road, and your grandkids were going to be breathing whatever's uncovered from there, I don't think that you would be telling me the same thing that you're telling me right now. Now, you guys can say that your surveys and you've got experience and this and that and the other. That doesn't help what we're going to be going through. So with that, I'm going to leave it open to whoever else wants to speak. Everybody knows how I feel on this. Everybody that knows my voice knows who I am. And I'm sure you know by now too, but it's just that, you know what, I'm 100% against this and I will fight it till the end.
Me too.
Me too.
Me too.
To this individual's.
Me too.
Me as well.
My name is Judy Preston, and
Not me.
who says that I can touch your property? I'm the oldest neighbor, well, not in age, but I have been out here longer than anyone here in this screen. I've been here 41 years. And my heart is pounding right now that you are going to come in and you are going to destroy where I have lived and where my grandkids run around and have a great time, and they love coming to what they call a farm, and you are going to ruin it. I can't believe you're moving in and you could give a rat's ass about any of us. You are going for the almighty dollar.
Yep.
Well,
What's affect our groundwater? Are you planning to blast? What's this limited toxicity? How's that going to affect everything?
My well is 50 feet from the property line.
So
There's a lot of questions in the chat. Do we want to stop? And a lot of these questions are coming up now, have already been typed into the chat. Do we want to work through these one by one really quickly?
Well, the thing is about a chat is when we're sitting here talking and speaking, this is us. We know who we are. We hear it. We know what's going on. You can be reading questions that you guys came up with and reading them as chat questions. We don't know. We can't see your chat. Open your chat file so that we can read.
You can see the chat. Everybody on the meeting can see the chat.
I'd rather have
Everyone can see the chat. I'm sorry. I'm for some reason I had no audio in the beginning. I had to go off, and then I had video or audio and no video, and now I finally have audio and video. But
Hey, Mr. Jones, I've posed a whole bunch of questions that I would like to have answered that would
pertain to protecting your assets. So turn on your chat and you can see what I've asked. I've asked about 5 questions so far.
All right, so the first question is, what road access are you using? Avenue V is a private road.
We are proposing to use Avenue V as it comes off of Sierra Highway.
Jesus.
And then continue to improve Avenue V as necessary on Mr. Wool's parcels to gain access to the material and to where we would be doing our processing.
What does improve Avenue V mean?
Yeah.
Well, Avenue V itself is in pretty good shape, but you'll see it ends actually just prior to the parcels in question here. There is an easement there, but there's no existing road, it's just a trail. And for truck access, this is what we'll propose to the county. Where obviously we need to level out and extend Avenue V for a limited distance to access that property.
What are you talking about, improving Avenue V from the property out to Sierra Highway?
No.
So there will be no improvement done to that area whatsoever.
It's under evaluation if the community doesn't want to have any of the have the surface of the road scraped and have any of the runoff and rain damage improved, then no, the road is accessible and usable as is. There's a few issues related to turning radius, entering Avenue V, and then again, improving or establishing the road to the 3 parcels that I presented earlier.
Well, there's no, some of my neighbors and myself, I have no issue with moving, you know, my motor home or trucks, trailers, things like that in and out of there. So what kind of equipment are you talking about bringing in that would exceed turning radiuses, that we would have to have turning radiuses changed at the entry point off of Sierra Highway?
Also, Avenue V between Trenmar and Via Famero is so narrow that sometimes it's hard for 2 cars to pass each other. And you're talking about putting these large trucks on this small, narrow road?
I would put forward that one of the assessments that we are doing as part of the permitting process is to provide to the county and to you the number of truck trips that are involved. And frankly, it's not that many. It's only a couple of weeks. The trucks are not necessarily any larger than the trucks that already access the neighborhood. So it is our intent to, as I said, limit our operations so that essentially the truck traffic and passenger traffic is no greater than already exists on the road.
So you're saying that you're going to excavate that much material, but you're only going to haul 2 trucks a week out of the property?
No, it's a couple trucks per day, but that's about it.
Okay, well, you just said a couple of trucks a week, you know, and now you changed it to a couple of trucks a day. Like you said that it was a 15-acre parcel and it was 1 acre that was going to be excavated, yet now you say that it's 1 acre per excavation site. So, to me, I already see huge red flags to how honest your company is going to be.
Well, I apologize if I misspoke. What I meant to say was, as part of the permitting process, we've prepared documentation that explains the truck traffic and passenger traffic in and out of the site, explains how we will manage noise and dust.
So you've already done that?
We're in the process of doing that. We've done an initial assessment. We've already done an initial assessment of habitat at the site and any potential impacts to groundwater, which there are none. And we will present a plan that documents any of the hazardous materials that we will be using and how those are addressed.
So
Have
you
you done a
mentioned that
cultural
you guys
assessment
don't
yet?
use cyanide?
We do not use cyanide.
Okay.
you
Well,
done a
because
cultural
cyanide
assessment
was a proprietary chemical at some point. So when you say proprietary chemicals, any chemical besides water scares the hell out of me.
So Ms. Watton, you've
Do
had
you
a
have a
number of
list of
questions.
chemicals?
We want to make sure we get to those as well.
So what a lot of these questions that are coming up are also listed in the chat. If we keep moving through these questions, I think it'll address
Great.
many people's concerns. So the first
okay.
question regarding access, there's a follow-up question. Question states, I live off Trenmar off Avenue V. I want to know about truck traffic on Avenue V. At this point, working with the county in early coordination, we have to provide the number of truck trips that are expected for material and equipment delivery, as well as personnel working on the site. A county roadway encroachment permit will be acquired for this project, and at that point, the county will require things like widening the road if necessary. We don't believe that will be necessary. If there needs to be small minimal improvements, like surface grading existing rain bars, or slightly widening the road to accommodate two-way traffic.
We don't want the road widened. Oh my God.
Is it a
We
private
like
road
the
though?
road as it is.
If it's a private road, how are you going to be able to do that?
Not a county road. Everybody owns the road in front of their property, even though it's an easement through the property. I know that because one of my neighbors tried to put a fence too close to the road and they couldn't do it.
I guess how I would characterize that is that in addition though, Mr. Wool owns the 15 acres that we're talking about, and we will adapt our plan to what the county allows us to do with respect to Avenue V.
All right, the next question, has an impact report been done? Will an archaeologist and or native monitor be present?
I think you're probably best to handle that one, Eric.
Yes, a previous firm has been engaged to conduct an environmental assessment which included biological and cultural resource studies. My firm has been engaged to update both of those studies, including biological and cultural resources. We're looking at Native American cultural resources as well as archaeological resources from 1910 to current. And yes, a Native American and archaeomonitor will be on site during all initial excavation in areas that are not considered backfill material.
Okay, Eric.
Wait. All initial excavation of areas that are not backfill. Can you clarify precisely what that means?
Areas of prior disturbance, such as the roadway portion of Avenue V and the access that will have to be modified at the termination of Avenue V and Via Famoso, are all in areas that have been considered prior disturbed and typically would not require a Native American monitor to be present as it's an existing roadway. Almost all other portions of these parcels would require archaeological and Native American cultural monitor to be present during initial excavations.
But not during non-initial excavation. At what point does an excavation go from initial to no longer initial?
Initial means the initial removal of material to the point that it's backfilled and compacted or then reworked. So in this case, as each location is opened and excavation commences, a monitor will be required. As the material is processed and backfilled, any work beyond that point, cultural monitor would not be required.
So a monitor will be there at any time you're literally pulling dirt out before processing.
That is correct. Native material, that is correct.
Correct.
What, native material, or do you call the tailings pile native material?
No.
You don't.
But I thought you were only excavating the tailings pile. I'm really struggling to understand what exactly is going to be disturbed and what is not going to be disturbed, and how it's only going to add up to just 1 acre or less than 1 acre.
Well, that'll be part of either a written response we can provide to you. It certainly will be part of the plan that we submit to the county. We did want to emphasize, though, that we're only accessing the surplus rock from the mine, and it is non-native material. We have no intention of accessing any of the native material that underlies what was moved there from the mine.
Okay, so just so people understand, and so I understand what you mean by native material and how that, we know things like tailing piles. And then we also understand subsurface, underneath the tailing piles, what was there and has never been disturbed. So in those terms, can you repeat what you just said?
Right. We
Please.
have no intent to access the native material, the ridge line that exists underneath the surplus rock that was removed from Red Rover Mine. We only intend to access to prospect the non-native rock that was dumped on these parcels.
So question, you must have some sort of an estimate of the depth of the material that you're looking at that you consider to be non-native material. What would be that estimated depth?
We have an estimate, but until we can mobilize to the site and do some of this prospecting, we don't know exactly what the contours are.
And what is that estimate that you guys have in mind? The depth?
Well, if there's a ridge line underneath, my estimate is on the edges of the rock piles, it's about 30 feet. And in the middle, it's probably somewhere between 10 and 20 feet.
So you're guessing that the reduction in the ridge line is going to be approximately 20 feet by the time you excavate out all the available material.
Around the periphery, yes.
Yeah, so you're talking about a 30-foot reduction in ridge line, which is going to definitely change the wind patterns through the neighborhood. So have there been any environmental studies as far as wind pattern changes and how that's going to affect things in the neighborhood and increase or decrease gusts through the area or anything like that? Just curious.
No, it's a good question. I'd like to emphasize that the project that we're describing is really should be considered a prospecting project, and that the changes to the shape of the terrain out there are going to be much smaller than what you're contemplating right now.
Well, you just said a 30-foot depth, and if you remove 30 feet of material or 20 feet of material in the center on the ridge line, that's a reduction of 20 feet. Are you going to then reconstruct the ridge line to where it is now?
Well, depending on the results of the prospecting will determine exactly what the nature of the restoration or the reclamation plan is.
Okay, so, and this is considered prospecting, and you guys are only prospecting and you're only removing material from the surface. The material that was not there, but through this whole thing, would that then open, once that ridge line is exposed, would that open the possibility to then turn around and mine that ridge line and possibly work your way down into opening a full-scale mine?
No. The property could potentially be developed into residential parcels, 3-5 acre single dwelling residences.
And no smaller than that? No development?
No.
Okay, that's one question that I appreciate that. But I wanted to make sure that we weren't preparing a property for development too, as far as small scale neighborhood or anything like we're seeing trying to be brought into the area.
No, I think the way to characterize this, and that's what I intended to show when we were talking about the nature of the equipment that we're putting out there as being mobile and temporary, it's the size of trailers or containers, that this is really a site assessment for its potential to access the gold and other metals there.
So then afterwards, then you would have to then prepare an entire plan for the actual full-scale removal of all these materials, which would then increase truck traffic and would then, we're talking about then full-scale.
To be perfectly honest with you, it would entail, I think, some of the activities you've correctly identified that would need to be assessed. I'm not so sure that the level of site activity and processing would change at all. It's really that small. What would be required is, because of the terrain involved in the nature of the hillside management zones, that admittedly there are very proper assessments and mitigation measures that would need to be taken to control erosion and stormwater runoff if you were to attempt accessing the material that constitutes the sides of these rock piles. We will not be doing that in this project.
No, it's just, this is the beginning. This is the beginning. We all know that if the beginning starts, then we're open to everything else that follows. I don't know if you saw 2 years ago when we had the major quick little downpour that we had a flash flood down Red Rover, ran onto the 14 freeway and everything else. And that's a heck of a lot of water that would come off the back side of that hillside towards the homes on Red Rover side if something like that were to happen again.
And it's exactly that kind of event that we were planned for. Eric, what do you have for your next question?
The next question, what does limited toxicity mean? Will it affect groundwater, and will you be blasting?
We will not be blasting. This is all material that's already been brought to the surface. In terms of toxicity, everything that someone had mentioned, use water and being comfortable with water. Our process is essentially aqueous based. It is 100% involves the movement of water. And we will be doing it in a way that we recycle our entire liquid stream, with the exception of what leaves the site in the processed ore. So there's a minimal amount of water use and consumption. And there's no residual toxicity precisely because we do recycle the water, and part of our process is to essentially neutralize the compounds that are used to access the metals.
Where will you be getting the water you use for the process?
We'll truck it in.
You'll truck it in? Okay.
What compounds are you talking about?
Yeah, will you provide an MSDS so we can look at it?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes, so one of the hazardous materials mitigation plan will include all of the MSDS materials for what we're working with on site. I can tell you it's essentially a salt solution and using bleach and carbon. And that's really the extent of the inventory of chemicals at the site.
I'm a little confused because you normally only have to do an HMMP, a hazardous materials management plan, when you plan to store on site an amount of material, hazardous material, that exceeds a certain threshold. Places that don't have that much of these hazardous materials don't have to do an HMMP. Are you just doing an HMMP because you plan to store an amount of hazardous material that exceeds these thresholds, or are you just doing it because it's a good neighbor thing to do?
A good neighbor thing to do. We'll literally only be storing water on site and salt in the solids for a short period of time. And yes, it's really to document the MSDS and other occupational health and hazard issues that would be important to the fire department.
So you have no actual obligation to prepare an HMMP based on your usage profile?
Well, Eric, can you help me out here in terms of we propose
from the materials from the proposed materials to be stored on site? That is correct. It would not be required.
Thank you.
And you're saying that the amount of runoff from any of these water-based chemicals, I'm just going to call them chemicals, that's going to be at a minimum and that's not going to go into our water table? How are you going to reclaim that once it's utilized?
It's going to be utilized, but it will be utilized in tanked in an enclosed fashion, so there will be no application of water or anything else to the property or the terrain.
So there's no excavation done by water pressure?
No, it's dry excavation.
Or any liquid pressure?
Correct.
Will we be given an entire list of any and all chemicals being used?
Yes. And I'm struggling to, I think I've mentioned them all actually right now. But in any case, we will have that written documentation available.
So will there be application of water for dust control or anything like that? Or will there be any application of chemicals mixed with water for dust control?
We will mitigate dust as necessary.
Well,
as necessary leaves things wide open.
Yes, and if you have no requirement to do a permit for federal or local compliance reasons because of these exemptions, what would compel you to do dust mitigation? And the other part of that is we do have valley fever here in this community. We've had residents who've been diagnosed with it and almost died from it. So when you use water to control dust problems, you actually you exacerbate substantially valley fever concerns. So other methods of dust control, rocks, gravel, are things that we have advocated in the past.
Well, then I think, Jacqueline, that's precisely the reason why we wanted to have this call and solicit your advice, the feedback on what are the preferred techniques for that. Because all of our processing takes place inside of trailers and containers and in a closed loop, and the ore processing will be taking place in a temporary structure. We've really done everything in the planning process to mitigate any releases of dust. The only ones I can contemplate right now are the ones that are typical just from operating an excavator and from the vehicle traffic.
Well, that brings up another problem. We're excavating, and you're working in a mine that was mined in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and they used a lot of mercury and arsenic in their mining processes. And the tailings will contain high degrees of those chemicals. Excavating in the open air, those dust particles will contain those toxic carcinogenic materials. They will not be self-contained in your loop, quote unquote. So you have a definite problem of releasing these chemicals that have been, for lack of a better word, dormant for almost a century. And you're releasing them not only into the atmosphere, but those dust particles will float to the neighboring properties on Red River Mine and the Shannon Valley and down towards the freeway because of the way the wind blows. And you will not be able to capture those toxic materials in your processes.
We will characterize what the nature of the rock is at the site. However, we don't believe that it is actually what you're describing as tailings. It is worked material.
Tailings or slag or disturbed materials, to use your word, your phrase, whatever you want to call it, tailings, slag, disturbed dirt, disturbed soil, disturbed rock. You're releasing these dormant toxic chemicals and materials that are really not dangerous to us at this time because they are beneath the surface to 20, 30, and I think I remember reading about the Red River Mine shafts going down several hundred feet. So all these materials have over time been covered up by soil movements, rock movements, things like that. Now you're just going to go in and you're not even doing core drilling first, from what I have heard coming in late, you're just going to start right in excavating in basically an open pit mine situation. And I come up from, I'm not a mining engineer and I'm not a miner, but I have a dear friend who's a gold mining engineer up in Montana, and I'm a copper mine engineer also in Montana, and I'm from the Nevada City gold mining country, and I know all the things that happen when prospectors go out and they start this prospecting process, and many things happen. And I don't care what kind of modern techniques you're using, nothing is 100%. And I think everybody's kind of jumping in and looking at toxicities and rain runoff and so on and so forth. But I know Jackie will correct me if I'm wrong, but according to the Department of Regional Planning and the title codes and the CS for Acton Agua Dulce, is none of this area is zoned commercial. It is R1, RA, it is agricultural, the hillside management codes themselves, nobody can develop or do anything on hillsides that are 22 or 25 degrees.
25%.
Yeah, 25%. So you're way out of line up there on working on a hillside on a hillside or several hillsides on both sides of that ridge. If you're at Avenue B and B in the Barrow, ridge.
Yeah. I just want to address two comments you made. Number one, we are restricting ourselves to the flat portions of the property, so we are avoiding.
But that doesn't include the problems of stuff that's coming off of those flat areas.
Well, we will control and manage that. I agree with your characterization of some of the concerns with mining and tailings. I would just point out that we believe this is the waste rock from the mine that has not been processed.
Legislation, I don't email me.
I can't hear somebody else.
I know, I apologize too.
Brandon, can you please mute? Brandon.
Yeah. Very good. So there's three possible sources of toxicity, and I don't think two of them are present here. One is toxicity from the nature of our processing, and as I've mentioned, that's non-toxic. Number two, the residual toxicity from historical mining operations we don't believe is present in this rock pile because that was performed elsewhere, and that's why I call this surplus rock from basically the rock that they did not find suitable for their activities of 100 years ago.
I know about reclaiming minerals and so forth from, slag or tailings or disturbed rock from other mines, whether it's a tourmaline mine or a gold mine or a copper mine. I know that the process, these days the technology is there to extract a very valuable amount of materials from those slag. And, that's all well and good if you were in a different area out in the middle of the Arizona desert and doing a strip mine for copper or something like that, but not copper in Arizona, but say Montana, there would be a whole different situation. But here you're in a farming, agricultural, residential, non-commercial for anything area, and it is zoned, and the CSDs for our area have been perfectly well stated and are pretty much inviolate. We had a situation 3 years ago with AT&T trying to come in and put a cell phone tower right smack dab in the middle of Shannon Valley. And their process, not mining, but there are very many similar things. You're using toxic chemicals, you're disturbing the dirt, and as Jackie pointed out, we do have a bad situation with valley fever where you're going to come in and disturb dirt with your trucks and, just the normal everyday activities. And whether you can mitigate the dust with water is one thing. You won't be able to satisfactorily for either side of the ridge in Red Rover or Shannon Valley. And with the water amounts you'll have to use on a daily basis to keep the dust down, you're going to start releasing the spores of valley fever from the earth. And there's a lot of things that are in violation of all the titles, the zoning titles. And I don't know why you've been allowed to even proceed this far in trying to develop this project. I think there should be a environmental report done, and that takes a couple, 3 years if you're lucky. I think you should do a hazardous materials report as part of that EPA. And, you know, Jackie, you can weigh in on this, but I think everybody's jumping the gun and talking about too many things that come after getting the permit to even think about working the property. And I think you're clearly in violation of bringing this type of mining situation into a residential and agricultural and farming area. And we've got horses and animals, and, you know, we've got runoff, we've got erosion, we've got hillside management. You know, if the residents around here want to do something like put up a shed, it takes 4 years to get a permit to do something. You know, and back up and address the basic problems of even thinking about developing that those acres up there, especially on a ridge where there is not supposed to be any development within, what is it, Jackie, 125 or 150 feet at the top of a ridge?
Yeah, there are a lot of, you've packed a lot of things in, Deb, but everything you've said I have nothing to correct or would never presume to correct. But I just want to make sure that it's understood that by developing this project and interpreting the code the way they have, there is no obligation to do an environmental impact report. There is no obligation to get a conditional use permit. There's no obligation to get any of the things that you're looking for because of my understanding of what it is they're proposing and the interpretation they have applied to the zoning code as well as federal code. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I'd like to respond to just a couple of things you've said here, because I think one of the next steps that we would like to do is, I think you don't have a sense for the scale of what we're proposing. So one of the things we could do is provide more detail on the size and the scope of our processing, show you what it looks like, give you a feel for, you know, exactly what the presence and impact is going to be, because we have intentionally limited the scale and deployed technologies so that we can address all of the concerns you've enunciated. When it comes to the chemicals we're using, it occurs to me that the best way to describe this, I would venture that everybody on this call has all of the chemicals that we're going to use under their sink or in their kitchen cabinet. And we are actually not using any chemicals that you cannot find in your house.
But the concern is the concern is the chemicals that you're digging up.
Yes, I'm not concerned with the chemicals that you're using, Mr. Loveland.
Exactly.
The disturbed materials that are toxic from the old mine that, you know, there were no rules and regulations for mining in the 1800s and the early 1900s until, in fact, up to the 1950s. And
I'd also like to, I'm sorry, Deborah, I don't mean to cut you off. Mr. Loveland, I'd like to know, when you say native materials, would you agree that that means virgin materials? That means dirt that has not yet been touched? Is that what you mean by native?
What we're trying to communicate in
virgin dirt,
and perhaps I should go back to the photo. There's clearly non-native rock that came from the mine that was chipped off of a ridge line. Clearly underneath these rock piles, there exists native terrain and native material.
But would you agree that when you say native, are you referring to virgin dirt?
Yes, I would presume, given that the operations at the mine were 80 to 100 years ago, and given the state of development in the area, that probably what lies underneath the rock was native and undisturbed at the time.
And according to the depths that you gave on what it is that you're going to be digging up, so then you would agree that Miss Deborah brought up how there's a lot of carcinogens in there. So then you would agree that that you're going to be digging in an area where they are present, because you would not be digging into virgin dirt.
No, I believe this rock is just like any other rock that might have been excavated from a site and moved. It has not been previously processed by the mine. It's literally surplus rock that was moved.
And so the reports that you're talking about, I'm sorry, just one last question. I'd like to know, you are saying that you will be transparent in what it is that you find. How is this transparency going to be available to us? Are we going to have to proactively go into your website and see what it is that you choose to share? Or are the residents that live in a certain mile radius going to have formal documents sent to them? Because if there are carcinogens in the air, I would say that those can travel far into the other side of Acton, well far away from this area. How are you going to show that transparency?
We will characterize and assess the materials on site and comply with the county requirements for reporting our site activities. I have to admit, I would disagree that the nature of this material is any more carcinogenic than any other rock material you find anywhere else, and what's present in the native mineral structures of all types of geology, of which of course there are trace levels of let's say, arsenic.
But if you visited any website, you know that the water trucks are only able to limit the amount of dust. Even the trucks just passing by will kick up a bunch of dirt. You can't possibly follow every single work truck that comes by our roads with a water truck. That's a lot of dust that you're bringing up into the air. Everybody has animals, people have asthma, that's an issue. So even though there's no carcinogens, there are issues with the dirt.
Yeah, like I said, I think one of the things we would need to do here is to present the assessment that we've already conducted, because I would put forth that our truck traffic is no greater than what's currently present in the community.
Well, if you add one truck to it, then you've increased what's in the community to begin with, right? And you're already having employees that are going to have to access it back and forth every day, depending on the number of employees, the number of vehicles that you have coming in and on. Yeah, you're going to increase the amount of traffic. You can't say that you're not going to increase the amount of traffic, because just by driving into the neighborhood to look at the property, you have already increased the amount of traffic. Now, to you, that might not be a big deal, but to us, yes, it is. And the other thing is that I've been in construction for 30-some years. I can tell my guy, don't throw this paint can in the dumpster. When it's wet, open it up. Let it dry out and throw it in, and then you can throw it away. How many containers of chemicals were thrown into those piles over there and buried up because they knew that nobody was ever going to mess with it? You can't be 100% sure, and until you uncover it, by then you've let the cat out of the bag. By then the dust is blowing, and it's blowing to my house, and it's blowing to everybody else's house. And my grandkids have a play set that's on the side of the house where you guys are planning on doing this.
I would put forward that if done properly, that's an element of actually improving and addressing any of the historical issues at the site. Eric, do we have, where do we stand on addressing all of the questions in the list?
We have quite a big queue here. The next question, where specifically have the principals done the same type of mining project?
I'm sorry, Eric, can you repeat that?
Where specifically have the principals done the same type of mining project?
Our initial site that we tested at was ore from Independence, California, using the process that we're going to use at this site.
The next question, are there water needs for the project and how do you plan to access the site?
I'm sorry, quick question before I'm going back. So at this mining operation in Independence, is that also a place where you secured exemptions from SMARA and local mining regulations?
No.
Thank you.
Are there water needs for the project and how do you plan to access the site? That's already been addressed.
Through Avenue V off of Sierra Highway, and we'll be trucking in whatever makeup water is required.
What is the expected duration of the mining operations, months or years?
We anticipate that this prospecting project will take perhaps 1 to 2 years. Well,
oh my God! No!
The reason for that is because we are limiting our activities to minimize impact, and therefore that extends the duration of the activities. To assess the site, it will take approximately that amount of time, given the proposed level of operations.
I have lived on my property for 35 years. I moved here to get away from shit like this. I can't believe that you can actually proceed with this project. We are on private roads.
Well, I guess I just don't know how to respond to that and balance the rights of the property owner of the 15 acres.
Yes, Mr. Loveland, the property owner does have rights, but those rights don't preclude destroying the area for commercial mining adventure, whether it's prospecting or actually developing the pit or strip mining. Probably will continue if you find enough value in the mineral content of the slag or tailings or whatever you want to call it. And again, I go back to the initial problem here is that you're trying to circumvent the zoning codes in a rural area, and you're leaping ahead of what you want to do without satisfactorily, without tricks, legally trying to start this process. You're in violation of the zoning codes. You're in violation of the private roads. You're taking people's private property for your commercial purposes. You're going to change those private roads. We went through the same thing with AT&T. They wanted to bring this cell tower in the Shannon Valley, and they wanted to use a private road to come in and put the cell tower up, and all the construction people, the utility people, the management, the tower management people would be coming in at, in that case, it was a 24/7, 365 access problem. And we were worried about toxic carcinogens from the lead batteries, the lead acid batteries, and the pesticides and herbicides they would be using around the cell site, the radio frequency, the radioactive emissions from the cell tower. And I'll tell you right now, we were successful in blocking that project. And we will do the same for your project because it does not belong in this area. And I'm sorry the owner of the property wants to develop this, but he's he's out of bounds because it's not just his property he's affecting. This is a closed system environment out here, and there's a specific demographic for this area. It is residential, it is farming, it is agricultural. It is not zoned for any type of commercial adventure or business, much less mining.
Well, respectfully, I'd like to put forward that it was our intent to hold this meeting so that we could engage the community, understand your concerns, describe the project to you. I can assure you that we're conducting the project under the full purview of local authorities in per local requirements. So that's the purpose of what we're doing.
And I'll just tell you that we are quite jaded out here because a lot of enterprises that have tried to come into the area, not that I'm not saying you've done this, but a lot of people have gone out of their way to manipulate the county and the Department of Regional Planning and the state of California to get their way. And I'm not making any accusations. I'm telling you why we're jaded and why we don't believe that when we come in and say, oh, it's just going to be this, we're just going to dig a 20 by 20, or 30 by 30 by 30 foot pit in several sections of this property, 3 parcels, and then all of a sudden we find out, no, that's not really what they're doing. And we have only to look at Suntex, the cement company or gravel company, all seen what they've done.
We have had a lot of problems with developers promising one thing and then delivering something else.
Well, what I would suggest then is that we've heard you today, and we appreciate your feedback, and we're seeking to be good neighbors. That's why we're doing this. So give us the opportunity to prepare the materials that are responsive to your questions and your concerns, and we'll come back before you to try and explain what we're doing to you.
Could you provide sort of a copy, aerial, a photograph of your operation up in Independence?
Well, there's no operation there now.
Did you take photos when there was one, or?
We can show you some photos. It's a completely different setting, so it's really a bit of apples and oranges in terms of the permitting issues. It was Bureau of Land Management site. It's much more remote. The materials didn't require excavation. So what I would like to put forward is that we fully anticipated. Already we've had multiple discussions about all of the issues and impacts that have been described today and are prepared to manage and mitigate. And so what I would ask is you allow us to go through this process and give us the opportunity to explain to you how we're going to address them and mitigate. So Eric, do you have anything else on our list that hasn't been covered yet?
Give me 1 second.
A one-stop meeting, and we have yet to have that calendar. So the work that we've done.
Where are we going to be able to access all of this?
Well, as soon as we complete our assessment and have our initiate the permitting process with the county, we'll be more than happy to put the technical documentation up on our website.
Are we able, as a community, going to be able to be present during this county meeting with you?
Well, I don't think it's the intent of the process to have the community present at the first one. We're really just going to present the project as we have today to the county, and we'd like to do the same to the Acton Town Council. But what I was going to suggest is we've been documenting all of the questions put forward today. We will prepare written responses with such documentation as we have today and make that available. There's no intent to say that we're conducting assessments or that there's any information that we're not going to make available. I guess we're a little bit earlier in the process than you might imagine.
Right. And also, with that being said, I wanted to say right now, I know you guys are doing exploratory drilling, but are you then going to, if you do any kind of surface mining or any kind of stuff like this, I mean, are you going to have to do an environmental assessment? Are you going to do initial study? I mean, what is your obligation to protect our community?
Environmental documentation will be prepared in accordance with CEQA, and the appropriate level of document will be dictated by the county after our first meeting.
Okay, so the county will dictate whether this has to be done or not.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused because if you are going to claim exemption from permit requirements, there will be no CEQA.
But the reason, the reason, Jacqueline, is because SMARA, state law, state regulations, county code allow this type of activity if it's circumscribed in scope in effort. So this is why what we would like to do is respond to the questions we've heard today and then come back with additional information and additional presentations where you can get a feel for the scope of what we're talking about, because I think people have visions of a very large mining process and mining project, and that's not what we're proposing.
You know what, Mr. Loveland, I really appreciate that offer because I think it's important, but I have to point out when, you know, you're explaining that the scope of this, at least this initial part, is small, and so these exemptions would apply, but your contractor is saying words like CEQA, which implies that it's a much bigger project. So that's why we're all getting, this is kind of like what happens with other developers we've had to work with. I'll use that term loosely when they say one thing and then something else happens. So let me just ask this question: if your prospecting work goes swimmingly and you get everything that you're hoping to get out of it, what is the next thing you would want, and would that entail CEQA and no exemption?
Phase 2.
It's not possible for us to determine that at this point. We simply don't know if there's a reason to consider more excavation. As I've mentioned, I don't believe the processing scope would get any larger than anything we propose now. And in my experience, and as I said, I'm a civil engineer in California, every project that gets contemplated has to consider where it fits in the framework of CEQA and or an exemption. And I've had some projects that go forward with categorical exemptions. Some are initial studies with mitigated negative decks. Some require full-blown EIRs. That's the process that we've entered into, and that's the kind of process, that's my only experience. That's all I've ever done when contemplating
I think it's really important to stress, this is to Jacqueline's comment, how early we are in the process. We're still in the planning and coordination phase with LA County, and depending on their feedback, we may move from a categorical exemption to an IS-ND level of document. At this point, we're not sure what's going to happen. It could either be pursued as a CE or an IS-ND.
So just for everybody,
folks on this call are aware of what that means.
Yes, so IS means initial study, M&D means mitigated negative declaration, which is, just so everybody understands what that means the finding is that there will be no significant impacts based on whatever thresholds that are established with mitigation measures to ensure that. So, or a negative deck, which means no mitigation measures whatsoever. It's just that I think that people here are a little bit I don't want to say what everybody else is thinking. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with sort of this foot in the door idea, which I understand, Mr. Loveland, what you're saying, and I appreciate the uncertainty and the status of this project, but I want to make sure you understand my apprehension for the reasons that have been mentioned. So at any rate, I appreciate if you could come back with some of these questions addressed, that would probably be helpful, at least for me. I can't speak for everybody else, but for me.
Thank you, we will.
Mr. Loveland, you had mentioned earlier briefly that water would be coming in. Where is it that the water is coming from, and is all of the water that you're going to be using going to be brought in from elsewhere? The reason that I ask is because we live in a community where during the summer, a lot of our neighbors, including us, we have a lower flow in our wells from the water table. And so a lot of us have to get water brought in to accommodate our needs. I don't know if there is a well on site where you're planning to dig, but if there is, are you going to be dipping into that resource, which will more than likely take from the community?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So this is one area where I'm on very solid ground. You might be surprised that I'm actually considered a bit of a water expert. And one of the reasons we're trucking water in is that we do not want to drill well and impact local resources in terms of the groundwater that's available to the community. We are really talking about very minimal amounts of water. That's why I spoke to the fact that all of our liquid process is contained. It operates in a closed loop. The only water that we need to bring in is called makeup water, which is essentially the water that would leave the site with the ore material. And it's a very small amount. It's a very small amount. So there will be there's no impacts to groundwater, and there's no impacts to surface water. There's no planned releases of water. I hope that answers your question.
You keep claiming that there will be no impact on West Avenue V, not on the Red Rover side, on the Sierra Highway side. Any additional trucks, be it the mining trucks hauling out the ore or the water trucks, that is going to severely impact us. You say that we've stated that two cars sometimes can't pass each other. It's not wide enough. You're talking about bringing in large trucks, and yet you are saying that it will not impact us? It will.
The amount of water that we've estimated is required would be one water truck a week.
Mr. Loveland, one quick question. As far as the scope of the project, what are we looking at as a time frame? How many days, weeks, months, years?
Well, that's hard to estimate because the process of engaging in the dialogue with the county is slowed down, I believe, because of COVID.
I'm just talking about your actual process. You should have some idea as far as you've already performed the same process in other places, so you know how much material you can handle and the amount of material available on site. So
the scale of what we are proposing would imply that any of the site improvements could I mean, the duration of the actual activities to improve the site probably only take a couple of weeks. And then mobilizing the equipment and actually commencing operations, notwithstanding any external delays, could probably be achieved in about 3 to 6 months.
Okay, and then how long would the operation continue for?
Well, the prospecting, like I said, is contemplated at the rate we're proposing, which minimizes these impacts, would occur over 1 to 2 years.
So that's just the prospecting. So you say that there really isn't going to be a significant impact to us, yet now we're going to have increased traffic, dust, and everything else for 1 to 2 years, and that's just the prospecting. And then if the prospecting goes well, you're not going to stop there. You're going to continue on because nobody walks away from money. So that's going to be an issue because now you're talking about a project that could go on indefinitely depending on working conditions and how the weather is and how the wind is and how the other things go and everything else. So this could be a project that ends up running for 5-10 years maybe.
Try 20 or 30.
Yeah. And there, if you were to review the material available at the site, I can say for certain that's hyperbole. It couldn't possibly be that long. There's not that much material there.
So what do you estimate if everything went great and you ended up going into phase 2, which you ended up removing a lot more material than just prospecting? What are you looking at the total? And I know your investors have all these. They aren't going to go into it blindly. This has got to be a number that they're very well aware of as far as how many years it's going to be till they leave the property if everything goes perfect.
That will affect our property values until they're gone.
Yes, it will.
Yeah, nobody's going to buy a house next to a mine.
Exactly.
That will have closed it in our real estate contracts.
I mean, Mr. Loveland, honestly, I'm like I said, I'm completely against it, of course, but I honestly feel like what's been done to this point so far, since you haven't had your meeting with the county yet, is that it's probably been the last. So I spoke to one of the owners of the property right next to mine. I spoke to him when they were first out on the property, probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And he was very forthcoming about exactly what they planned to do to the property or what his plans were for the property. And I'm finding it, I find that it's almost deceiving if what he is saying was going to be done to the property ends up being done to the property. So it's, to me, I feel like what has been done since I ran into the owner on the property last time was that a lot of people and a lot of lawyers have been sitting around trying to figure out how they can scale this work to fit the laws so that it can get done. That's why the scale is what it is. It's not about the residents, because believe me, if it was about the residents, you guys wouldn't even be here. I honestly, truly believe that you're trying to scale the project to fit it into the existing laws through the county, which will allow you to get onto the property and begin the process. And you don't have an issue with scaling it as small as you have to, because all that does is increase the amount of time that this project will continue. And the longer it's going to affect the residents here.
Well, I can't speak to any of the prior activities or the scale or the composition of any prior project. I would agree that it is our intent to employ technologies that address all of these issues and mitigate all these problems. That is true. That's the purpose, that's the advantage of the process that we have proposed. So it is true that we're trying to bring the benefits of advanced technology and the scale of this process to enable the project.
It's of course that's your job. That's what you do. You fit project to laws so that the projects can come to fruition. That's what you do, and that's why us as the residents here, the people that live here, understand that the almighty dollar is king, and whatever it takes to scale that project to get it done is what matters. And I mean, I appreciate the fact that you guys have had this meeting and allowed us to voice our opinions and that stuff. And I'll, unless something goes drastically different, I'll keep my mouth shut from now on and let everybody else say what they have to say. But everybody that knows me here and you know my voice, you know who I am. You can knock on my door anytime, you know that.
My concern is you're going to go through this point to and say it's an existing mine, so we're not going to change anything from what's already there, but what's already there will never have gone through environmental review. So what you're doing is raising the baseline assessment, so the impacts look to be negligible when in fact, or will be much smaller than if you really were going in for a mining permit at a new operation. And there's just no getting around that. I'm not seeing a way around that. And I'm using different words, but I think that is an essential part of Mr. Jones's concerns. And I have another conference call at 4 o'clock on the CSDs with Donna Tremere, so I'm gonna have to ring off soon. I apologize, but.
Let me just wrap up by saying, it's our intention to be good stewards of the environment and good neighbors. That's why we entered into this dialogue. We would appreciate the opportunity to put forward exactly more of the parameters and contours of this project. I actually view it much more like a groundwater or soil remediation project than anything else. In terms of appearance and technology, it actually looks a lot more like a soil remediation project than it does anything else. And I can understand why people are using historical experiences in a mindset to think that this is some large, horrific mining project. But that's why we've entered into this dialogue, and we'll continue to provide information to you and answer your questions. We are coming up at the top of the hour.
Can I ask one more question? I'm so sorry. I'll make it very quick. So at night, if you're going to store equipment and you have structures, are you going to have light up there? Because this is a very dark, beautifully dark community at night. Are you going to have these blazing lights? So I'd like you to do an assessment on ambient light, because that would really make an impact.
No, I completely understand. And part of our proposal is to limit any of the excavation activities to daylight hours, and frankly, weekly daylight hours. So no nighttime operations, no weekend operations, and the process.
So no lights at night?
No security lighting?
Yeah, I would say minimal lighting. Certainly, we can prepare a lighting plan so that it's basically all that's required for, site security.
That could be quite extensive on a site that size.
Right.
Eric, do you see anything of tremendous value that we ought to try and address now?
Can I ask a quick question, please? So I'm struggling to, I don't know a lot of the terminology. Obviously I haven't lived here for 40 years. My family's lived for 38. I've lived here for 35. But I'm struggling to kind of understand the end goal. Soil mediation, I'm literally looking at the two mountains we're talking about right now outside my window. I can see it from both right now. If soil mediation was a problem, why now? Why is this being discussed? Why is the investments being made now? Obviously, I think it's because you guys are trying to find something to be profitable. I'm assuming gold. I could be wrong. But I'm struggling to understand why the effort, why now, why soil mediation now in 2021 and not 1949 or 2007. And maybe it's too soon to answer, I don't know. But I'm just struggling to find out what the end goal is.
Thank you. What I was trying to relate was, of course, the property has economic value because the surplus rock has gold and other metals in it. What I was trying to communicate is the nature of the processing is not a large, obtrusive, massive excavation surface mine, the nature of the processing equipment and the scope of operations is much more akin to a soil remediation project in terms of footprint and optics and presence at the site. The ultimate end goal is the property is zoned heavy agricultural. You could put a single dwelling on it, and the ultimate end goal could be to put 3 houses as it's currently zoned on the property.
Excuse me for asking, where will we leave our contact information? Because I'd like to be aware of step by step as this proceeds along. And even for all of us here in the community, in Red Rover and Shannon Valley. So you obviously don't have any of our contacts except the addresses, but anything online to where you will email us for the steps as you proceed through them?
Well, certainly right now, the only contact information we have was the mailer that we sent out. Feel free to leave phone numbers or emails in the chat here, and we will respond there. Otherwise, you have our contact information.
Mr. Hanson, could you post that? Could you post up that contact info one more time, please?
I'm going to do it right now.
Thank you.
That you can.
And while John's posting that, there's one more question that hasn't really been addressed through the course of the conversation. On the assessor's map, these properties are labeled as restricted use area. Can you address what that means and how it applies to this operation?
Give me one chance here.
No problem. Perfect.
Okay, can everybody see the email address, the website, and the phone number?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, very good.
Now, how is our community going to get together and communicate with one another?
Well, perhaps one thing Jackie and Jeremiah Owens can do is set up a Acton Town Council Zoom meeting, or maybe we can all meet at the park and have a peaceful protest again.
We might.
Okay.
We as people are aware, and even as we've seen on this call, sometimes it's very difficult for people to have reliable, strong, good access for these Zoom sessions. And so what we've done in the past is have protest meetings because those are permitted under the COVID restrictions. We're still not allowed to have public meetings, that's still prohibited. So until that restriction is lifted, we're limited in what we can do. The Acton Town Council has not convened Zoom sessions because the feedback we've heard from the community is that they oftentimes are not, they're not ideal, we'll put it that way. So we could do a protest meeting. I think it would be better though if we actually received some of this information and had a chance to look at it so we could sort of speak cogently about some of the issues that have been addressed. Would you all agree with that, or?
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
So is maybe the best thing to do? Okay, so we can do it one of two ways. The information that you've gathered, if you could post it on your website, it's the Black Rock Properties, I think was the link.
Yeah.
The Acton Town Council is a little bit reluctant to post information directly from the developer because it gives the impression that we are advocating and supporting it, which we haven't taken that position yet, right? Obviously. So I would make, as a correspondence secretary, I would request that if you could, to please post that information on your website, the E-Metallurgy or website or the BlackRock, whatever. And then so that we can all look at it and then convene a public meeting, which it'll be open to the public, so you will be available, obviously, to attend. But you know, if that could work, it's some time frame, and then we'll have a chance to look at it, then we'll put together a meeting.
That would be great, John.
One more thing, Loveland, that I would like to see. I briefly saw a page on your presentation flash by that was a kind of a diagram of the plot, but I would like to see a specific plot plan based on the assessor's map developed by your company, or if you do those things, I would like to see a scale. I would like to see all those pits outlined and where you plan to put your containers and your excavation equipment and any chain link fences and any lighting and your ingress and egress from the property, and basically everything that goes along with submitting a property plan to develop, whether it's a storage yard or, a cell tower or a mining prospecting adventure. I would like to see a detailed plot plan submitted along with all the other information so that we have a diagrammatic visual that everybody can understand, because we're all used to looking at plot plans and assessor's maps. And I am especially interested in what the restricted use area designation is for that property, for what Mr. Crimmins posted. I haven't had a chance to go to the assessor's map to take a look at it yet, which I will this evening, but restricted use areas are definitely restricted for very good reasons. And we want to know more about what that restricted use is. We want it defined.
As we prepare those materials, we will certainly make them available. And
also, there's a Title 22 that the LA County has that would be very interesting to look at as well.
Title 22 is the zoning codes for the
right, but it also deals with aesthetics and what put on properties and what you can do with properties. So I mean, that would be something to throw out there as well.
Okay.
That's what I brought up earlier, that the project is in violation of the zoning codes for this.
Right. I agree.
Well, I encourage all of you to contact us on our website and make sure that those that want to entertain a dialogue and receive technical information, please make sure that we have your contact information. And with that, we thank you all for your attendance and your feedback, and answering your questions and providing additional information. So thank you.
Neighbors.
Thank you.
Okay, as you can see, it was a bit of a heated virtual meeting there with many of the residents in that area against the proposed project, which they said could take up 1 to 2 years. And there was a little bit of feedback. Not sure if everyone was muted. There was definitely some feedback there, so I apologize for that. But it looks like there's going to be a lot more discussion on this, and possibly the town council will have a protest type meeting again soon in the park where we're allowed to meet. Groups are allowed to meet 100 or less under the COVID rules, unless things get relaxed and we're able to meet, indoors again. So thank you very much.